Hey guys, Sebastian here with another Cardano update. This time we're going over the April 26th weekly technical report. So a few things this week, so let's get right into it. First thing is that they're going over the rework of the wallet. So as you probably know, they've been remaking the wallet over time since departing with Circle. So they're talking about doing some reverse engineering of the specifications. So if you don't know, this time as they're remaking the wallet, they're trying to make it more like a spec-driven. They've got like a theoretical layout of what it should be, and they're trying to make the code match the specification. So when they say reverse engineering the specification, there's like two things I can possibly think of. One is that they have this document that they've written out, the specification. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do we go from the specification to the code? Maybe one thing they mean by reverse engineering. The other thing they might mean is that they're looking back at the Circle code and trying to figure out exactly what's happening and trying to like match its behavior in their new version. And we'll see more about this later on, but that's kind of like one of my thoughts about what this might mean. Next up, they're talking about machine-readable logging. So if you were here back in January, I believe, they were talking about trying to figure out a way to collect logs whenever there are errors, whenever your wallet has a problem or whatnot. And at the time, they're trying to figure out if they should balance human-readable logs versus machine-readable logs, and both have their ups and downs. So I think this is still related to this. So now they're trying to work on some machine-readable logs along with the logs they already have. That's kind of what this is about. And they're like doing some progress on the figuring out exactly what it's gonna look like. Next up, they're talking about dataless. More specifically, they're talking about the paper wallet feature, which we've seen a demo of a while back, and they're now doing the testing to make sure that it's ready for release. So I think it might be slightly tweaked, and I will see that later on. But mostly, like things have been going well. It seems like the feature is like mostly good to go. Next thing they're talking about like a few UI changes. So I went through the UI changes with you guys last week. So if you want to see what the new UI, this is like a list of like small tweaks here and there. If you want to see that, you can go see my video last week. But it's not anything like that big. And the next thing, they're just like getting ready for the next release, which as Charles said, is coming up next month. Should be middle of May, I believe he said. Next up, we're going to the wallet backend. So for the wallet backend, there's still a task of decommissioning the old exchanges branch. So I've talked about some previous videos. This isn't really relevant to any end users. This is only relevant for exchanges. And if you're an exchange, you probably already know about it. So I'm gonna like go ahead and skip that for now. If you've seen my videos in the past, you've seen me explain what this is. Next up, it's CBR60, write and validate formal specification for the new wallet backend. So like I mentioned earlier, they've been like making a new wallet backend. This is in addition to the wallet spec related to tracking metadata and transaction history. So as I mentioned earlier, they've got a wallet spec that says what the wallet should be theoretically. So this is like a documentation. They've like finished this. They've merged it into the code base. So if you want to go check it out, you can go see kind of like this new iteration. It's all written in LaTeX, so you need to like install a tool to like turn this into a real document. But if you're interested, you can go check it out. Next one is CBR 17, implement wallet backend, new data layer following its formal spec. I don't think there's like a specific pull request for this. This is just like a generic goal they've been trying to work towards. And there's a few things like related to this. One of them is they mentioned they're moving from a data storage interface to the Cardano interpreter. Something related to matching. I don't actually know exactly what this is because I haven't seen anything called the data storage interface anywhere. If you know what this is or you've heard of it, I can't find any reference online or in the code about this. The Cardano interpreter could mean multiple things. So they actually have in their new interface something that's actually called a Cardano interpreter, which is used for building up the inductive wallet. So if you don't know what the inductive wallet is, it's like a way to mathematically build wallets and blockchains for testing purposes as a way to make the testing for all this easier. And it's made in such a way that you can build up these blockchains for testing purposes using properties from the specification we saw earlier. So they have an interpreter for like interfacing with this, and you can see the code here. They also have an interpreter for the UTXO model, so you can also like go check that out. This is also part of like the new wallet, also used for all the testing, and so it could mean a few things. You can go check out their like a domain specific language if you want. They have like a few domain specific languages in the code base actually, so you can go check out some of their other domain specific languages outside of like just this these domain specific languages for the new wallet if you're interested in these kinds of things. But this is all related to like extending testing infrastructure, like I mentioned. These processes are all just to have better testing of the wallet and of the settlement layer as they're building more features. So that's kind of, I believe, what this is talking about, but I don't, I'm not sure what the DSI is. Next, we're talking about active wallet generative tests. So as I mentioned before, they're splitting the wallet into a few different components based on functionality. One of them is this difference between active wallet and passive wallet. Okay, a passive wallet is not allowed to send or transact money, whereas the active wallet is. So this is kind of like the difference between the two. And I think I have it right here. They have an active wallet layer and a passive wallet layer inside the code. So they've been going through, this is like adding transactions to the wallet active layer. This is adding addresses to that wallet active layer. So they're like slowly building onto this new wallet infrastructure that they have, where there's the active versus passive, and then there's also testing versus kernel, which is like a main mode, versus what's the other one? Legacy, which is like the old wallet. So they've been like working through these different things to try and redesign how this wallet works. And that's kind of what they mean by inductive rollbacks, which is to say, like, as they're building this inductive wallet, and they can like take the blockchain and roll back the blockchain as a test on their test net, if you will, to see if everything's working. And they're talking about like narrowing down some issues, and that's fine. Yeah, they're also talking about the block listener for the passive wallet. So it's like I said, the passive wallet is the one that's you're not allowed to do transaction with. So they have like a block listener, just like update the blockchain, and that's it. And that's kind of what they're talking about here. They're working on that for the passive wallet. Next up, it's networking. For the networking, they're talking about speeding up verification and application of blocks. It's something they've been working on for like multiple months. And they're talking about adding the encoding size to the binary and phrase class. There's no code for this as far as I know. But they're working on it apparently. One of the things for the networking change is they've been trying to do a lot of profiling, and they recently written documentation for how to do some profiling of Haskell to try and figure out how to make all of these processes faster. So if you want to figure out like why does syncing the blockchain take so long, other than just networking, like what parts of the code are slow and all this kind of stuff, this is what this is meant for. And I think they mentioned like later on the report that they're trying to like get people to be like a benchmark team or something of the sort to try and like make all this better. So I think like the networking is being like encompassed by this larger goal of trying to do more benchmarking. That's like my understanding from the code. For the DevOps, this is all just like internal stuff, I guess. You can read this if you want, but this is nothing like a user facing. This is stuff like, oh, we're making our builds more reliable, stuff like that. They've been doing some more continuous integration along with integration tests to just like make tests as they're programming. This is mostly like internal stuff. They're talking about regressions they found, which hopefully will not delay their release. But they're talking about the upcoming 1.2.0 release I was talking about earlier. And they found some issues in it. And now they're testing the release candidates. So RC means release candidate. So this means like they found some problems with the other ones. They fixed the problems. Now they're like doing test number 2, round number 2, to see if everything is now fixed. Some of this stuff related to like the API change from V0 to V1. which I talked to you guys about how they used to have the V0 API, now they got the V1 API, which is like a much better, much cleaner, much more like has more features and all of that. If you've ever tried to build something using that interacts with the settlement layer, so if you're like an exchange or you want to build something similar, if you're using the V0 API, I highly suggest you move to the V1. It's still beta, so they're still like switching stuff around, but hopefully you'll notice that this is like a much better setup. Yeah, and then they're just talking about how they're doing benchmarking, which I mentioned earlier. And then lastly, they're talking about third-party data plugins. Like, this is a discussion that they're having whether or not this feature should be included. I think it'd be kind of strange if they have this, because I don't think Daedalus was built with this in mind particularly. I'm not sure the UI is like set up correctly for this. But it'd be an interesting feature, because if you've ever used like Ethereum, if you ever used the Parity wallet, you know, you can like kind of just hook stuff up with it, which is really nice for third-party integration. And it'd be nice to see something like that for our Cardano. That way people can like put in their dApps natively into the wallet and all this kind of stuff, and it'd be great for debugging and also for like a user experience. Next, they're talking about an issue we saw last week, which is related to inodes. This, if you don't know what inodes are, this is like a technical discussion about like Linux, where files are saved using like nodes. And this was related to the fact that if you ever use the wallet and you went to the folder on your computer, you might have noticed that it creates a bunch of really tiny files to save the blockchain, and this is causing some issues. So this is what they're talking about here. And there's ways you can fix this, but none of them are like that easy to like justify whether that's good or not. So they've been like trying to tackle this for a while now. Next, they're talking about cloud provider management and like some internal audit on how their API keys are managed. This is most like internal discussion related to IHK, not really to like the more broader audience. Next up, yeah, they're talking about QA. So they're talking about this Prasix project. I think this is the first we've heard of it. I don't think this is like mentioned anywhere else before. But they're talking about, yeah, this is like what I mentioned earlier. They're talking about trying to do like more involvement with the benchmarking to try and facilitate benchmarking, try to make it easier. And so I think this is going to be like I mean, they've been working on this for a while, all this benchmarking stuff, but I think now instead of kind of like this ad hoc work, I think they're probably like moving towards a more formalized system for how to do benchmarking to make the wallet faster and also make sure that the wallet does not accidentally get slower as they build in new features. And I think, yeah, this is kind of what they're saying. They're trying to like diversify the skill set, make sure everybody knows what's going on, and make sure this is like an important thing everybody's aware of. Next, we're talking about the testnets. I think everybody's like heard about the testnets at this point. They're releasing a few testnets, one of them being the KEVM, and then the ILE testnet, along with some other stuff. And so they're just saying that they've been working on this. Next up, delegation. For the delegation, they're saying they're still working on the paper, which is fine. The incentives, so the incentives is really to like these staking also. So these are both like staking, but like the incentive is one of the most people have been waiting for the most, in the sense that they want to know what the rewards are for being a pool, what the rewards are for staking, all this kind of stuff. This is all be in this incentive paper. And they're saying that they're still trying to tune the paper a bit. But it's still like making progress. Next, they're talking about networking. So it's like what I'm saying. They've been doing a lot of just benchmarking, and that's basically what they're saying. They're just saying like to make sure everything's working well, and we can actually make the blockchain game faster and all this kind of stuff. They're just doing a lot of benchmarking. And then they've also said like because of 1.2.0 release, they've kind of held back about making changes because this could like if they make a big change and there's like some bugs in, they may have to like delay the next release. So they're just saying that they haven't like really put out anything for now, and that's kind of it. Next, they're talking about the runtime verification, which says the company which contracts out to make the KILE work, and they're saying that they're preparing for Mantis code merge. So if you don't know what Mantis is, this is the Ethereum Classic client. and so they're preparing for the test net on the Mantis for now. Marlowe's this domain-specific language for smart contracts. They're saying they're working on it. You can go to the GitHub now if you want to test it out. You can already find a website, internal website, where you can test it out, write your own smart contract. There's no testnet or anything. This is just seeing the actual compilation. For smart contract languages, they're still working on it. And for Reagan, which you don't know, this is the testing infrastructure where you try and programmatically create test cases. I've explained this multiple times before. If you want to go check out a previous video for this, they're saying they're still working on it. So that's it for this report. I have a bunch of other stuff actually that's not in this report, interestingly enough, that I thought might be worth going over. So I'll try and make this very brief. One, they fixed the bug with Unicode character support, or I think they just mostly made it more clear. If you had some Unicode problems, there's still some Unicode problems remaining. There's still quite a few of them in the code base, I think, that people hit into, which sometimes causes a connection issues. Sometimes if you hit the connecting and it's stuck on connecting, it might be related to this Unicode issue. I think this might fix one of them for different locales. Another one is they've been working on this utility for generating X509 certificates for TLS authentication. If you're a developer that's been trying to build something off the settlement layer, and you've had certificate issues or TLS issues, they've been kind of rewriting how this works. And this is one of the large tasks based off of this. So this is the parent task, or one of the parent tasks, and you can see they've got a few different stuff. The server-side TLS check we've talked about in previous weeks, and they're trying to run all their tests and now go through this new TLS connection they've got, and so that's been going on for a while now. Next up, we saw, I think maybe last month, 2 months ago, they're making changes to the diffusion layer in Cardano, which is the part of the code base that handles all the subscribing to peers on the network, all this kind of stuff. So if you've been using the API, the V1 API, they had this node info structure that it was kind of a generic structure that said we may add stuff to it later. So now they've added information about the subscribers to this endpoint. So if you wanted to expose information about subscribers through your API, for a reason, if you want to test how your network connectivity is and all that kind of stuff, that'll now be available through the node info API endpoint. Next one, this is one of the bugs they fixed for the 1.2 release. That's a problem they found, which is they did not forbid operations if wallet is not synced. So that they changed it so now that if you have the blockchain open, it's not sufficiently synced, some of these endpoints, the API endpoints, will now return errors saying you're too far behind and doing these operations may not work. So it's a bug fix, and just be aware of that if you've been using the API. So that's one thing. Next up, if you're an exchange, they finally finished up the exchange onboarding documents, or this fixed to it. So that was merged in, so you may want to check out the latest version of this document if you're interested. They also removed something from an API. So it used to be that whenever you got the wallet address in the API, it would give the balance. But this is a slow to compute, and you can get in different ways. So they just removed this from the endpoint, and they said if it's really needed, they can reintroduce it. But it was this is a non-trivial computation. So there's a lot of times where you only care about these other three things, and you don't care about the balance. So just to serve that, they got rid of it in the new version of the API. This is only in V1, V0, it's still there, I believe. Also, they have a new project, I should say new, it's been around for almost a month now, which is a Cardano diagnosis program. So a lot of people have had problems where they've complained oh, my wallet doesn't sync or whatever, and they're actually known issues. But even if they're known issues, they have to contact support or contact people on Reddit or whatever, asking hey, does anybody know what's going on? So this tool is meant to programmatically check if the problem you're having is a known issue, and if so, it'll just tell you about it beforehand. So they've been working on this for almost a month now, I guess 3 weeks now, and so I'm pretty excited. I think this will help a lot of people who have had problems and have had trouble reaching out to the community for information about what they can do to fix the problem. Next, they also added a code organization guideline. So if you've ever been interested as to how the code is organized on the GitHub repository, might be an interesting document that they recently created. I used like a month ago also that you can go check out and see kind of how everything's organized. On the data side, small things. One, they created a template for pull requests. So if you ever checked out pull requests on Daedalus, you might be excited to know that now they're trying to have a template, so it'll be easier to follow what they're doing. This kind of the template looks like it's still a work in progress. But especially like if you wanted to add a new feature to Daedalus and you weren't really sure how to go about it, now they have like a really nice checklist and all this kind of stuff. So now you know to do all this before you can submit your change. Next up, they fixed the problem with paper wallet on the QR code, and that's basically it. It's just like a slight instability where sometimes the QR code cannot be read correctly, but it's not that big of a deal. And that's it for the report for this week. Hopefully you learned a lot. If you want to keep track of these updates with me, you can follow me on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube. I'm active on like a lot of social media platforms. I'm also active on Patreon and all that kind of good stuff. You can find all the links to all the topics I talked about in this video in the description. So if anything caught your attention, you can go check it out there. And hopefully I'll see you guys next week.